Hi, I'm John. This is my show, An American Scheme, where I'm proving that Diana Ross is Michael Jackson's actual mother. So, everybody always says the Jacksons, they all look alike. Oh, Michael looks just all like his brothers. Oh, Michael looks like his sisters. Michael looks like Joe. Michael looks like Catherine. They all look alike, you know. They always say this stuff. And so, I just want to show you basically how they fooled everybody. Because when you know the truth, and then you can clearly see that Michael does not look like those guys. Those are the Jacksons, and Michael doesn't look like them. Not only does he not look like them, he doesn't have the talent of the other ones. Michael has real talent. None of them have his talent. They don't look alike. Look how thin like Michael is compared to Tito. Because Tito looks just like Joseph, you know? And when you want to look at their faces, if you look at Jermaine has the appearance of Catherine. And so Michael doesn't look like Jermaine. Michael doesn't look like Tito. You know, right there, that's the parents. There's Joe in Tito, and there's Catherine in Jermaine. Michael doesn't look like them. They just blend together, and they blended together so well because they were in a music band, and they were pushing this brand, the brand name recognition of the Jacksons, and then they were blurring the lines by just putting them all in the same hairstyle and the same uniform type of thing of what is common in the music group world. It was common for them to be able to do this like this and put the label, the Jackson families. Jackson family says they're all family members, but so let me give you an idea of something that's like, okay, we were raised with the Jacksons this way, and you were told that they were family members, okay? So you just assumed, oh, they're all family members, and then you in your head envisioned that they all look alike. Everybody created their own thing at that point. But so let's take a look at some other bands. So, okay, now the Beatles. The Beatles, if they came up, okay, now I'm going to assume that people, like, because the Beatles are so famous, I'm going to assume that everybody knows that they're not related, okay? But what if the Beatles, what if they had told you that that was a group of brothers, that they're all brothers, okay? Like the whole time, let's say, and they were telling you they're brothers, okay? And then, you know, they grew through time, like this would be off of like Sgt. Pepper's. This looks like the outfit of Sgt. Pepper's, which is later in the career of the Beatles. They sure look like brothers to me. If they were told you the whole time, if they were telling you, oh, they're all brothers, the Beatles, yeah, they're a band, they're all brothers, you know, they're all brothers, they're related. Wouldn't you look at a picture like this and say, look at them, they all look exactly alike. And like through their whole career, when they were known as the Mop Tops, you know, and they all look alike, look at them, they got the same hairstyle, they all look alike, of course, if they're their family, they're brothers and stuff, right? And so, like, just look at that image of the Beatles, okay, who are not related at all. Okay, look at the Beatles, not related at all, but they're in a band, and that's the brand of the Beatles, okay? So just look at that image and this image of the Jacksons. Can't you see the similarity of that's what takes place in the business, okay? That's what they did with the Jacksons. It was real easy for them to do this and get them to all look alike, and if they call them the Jacksons, yeah, everybody's going to think they're all alike. Okay, but so now let's play a game. Let's play a little bit of game and let's test this a little bit more. So let's go to here. This is the band Van Halen. Okay, now two of these guys, these four guys right there, two of them are brothers. Okay, so now Van Halen's, I'm sure some people know who they are, but then I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't, you know, especially younger people. They wouldn't know. They would know the band, the name of Van Halen, but they wouldn't know who's related in that band right there. So, like here, I'll give you a few seconds. Do 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 ba 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 bum bum. Okay, so who's the brothers? Okay, so the band is Van Halen. Okay, so that's why the name of the band is Van Halen, because you got Eddie Van Halen. Okay, that's why it's Van Halen, is because there was two brothers in the band. Okay, so it's Eddie Van Halen and his brother Alex right here. Okay, they're brothers. Okay, but was it so easy just to see that from the picture? If you didn't know, was it so easy to say? Was it so easy to say they were brothers? You could have said, "Oh, it's these two guys. They're brother. I bet they're brothers." You know. You could have said, I mean, it could have been anybody. It could have been a lot of different things. You could have even said, oh, these two guys are brothers. Or maybe these two guys are brothers, you know? It could have been a lot. If you didn't know, then how do you know? You only know because what they told you, okay? So now, let's do another one. This is a band called the Doobie Brothers, okay? So, this is the Doobie Brothers. Who in this band is brothers? Okay, I'll give you some time to think about it. Do 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 bum 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 boom boom. Okay, so the Doobie Brothers. Who in this band is brothers? None of them. They're not related. They're just called the Doobie Brothers. Okay, they're not related. But if they would told you, oh, they're brothers, they're all brothers, you know, they all look alike, right? Oh, they all look alike, except the black guy, right? Who, he looks like a Jackson. Doesn't that look like, if they told you that was Tito's brother, it'd be like, oh yeah, one of the Jacksons is in the band, the Doobie Brothers. Yeah, oh yeah, you'd be like, yeah, he looks just like Tito. That's what I'm saying. It's like when they tell you this stuff of like, oh, they look alike and this stuff like that, you know, it's not so easy. Okay, so let's do one more. This is a band called the Black Crowes. Okay, now I'm not messing with you. Two of these guys are brothers. Okay, so who's the brothers? Who's the brothers in the band? Okay, I'll give you some time to think about it. Look it over. Do 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 do. Bum ba bum 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 bum. Okay, who are the brothers? Okay, so in this band you have the singer Chris Robinson right here. And his brother, Rich, right here. Now, do they even like totally look alike? I mean, it could have been anybody. It could have been anybody. It could have been anybody. If I tell you two of the guys are brothers, so those guys are brothers, okay? And that's the way it goes, you know. How do you know who they are unless they tell you who they are? It's hard to know who these people are. They all look alike. You know, they all look alike. They all could be family. How do you know? How do you know who these people are? Like, I don't even know who they are. I could be, like, these guys, as I'm looking at them, like, these guys kind of look alike. Like, I don't know who these guys are. Because it's these two guys are the main guys of the Black Crowes. But maybe these guys are brothers, and I just don't know. I didn't study enough and stuff, right? Maybe those guys are brothers, too. But these are the two guys, the Black Crowes. These are the two guys here. In here, those are the two main guys. But maybe I don't know. Maybe these guys are brothers and stuff too. You know, and it's like, well, if they're brothers, then maybe they're all brothers. Maybe they're all family, or maybe they'd say, somebody'd say, yeah, well, they're all family. They're cousins. I mean, how do you know? If they told you that, okay, well, these guys are brothers, and then these guys are brothers from another mother, but they're like cousins and shit, right? If they say, oh yeah, they're all family and stuff, they're related. It's their mothers. You know, they're all cousins, you know? If they told you that shit, then how would you know? How would you know? You would just know whatever they told you. And so, same thing like I said, if they wanted to sell the Beatles as an image, as a family band, if that's what they wanted to do in the beginning, then they could have done it. And they would have went through all their time, and then you get to the point where you get up to Sgt. Pepper's, and you're like, damn, they all look so alike. Of course they're brothers. Look at, they all play the music, they all play the instruments, and they all sing alike, and it's the Beatles. They're a family. That's just what they do. How do you know? How do you know the truth unless you know the real truth? You don't know. You're going to believe whatever they tell you. And when you look at Michael, like, look at Michael's, like, how thin he is compared to Tito. I mean, it's just totally like their body shapes are not even anywhere near the same. Michael doesn't look anything like Tito. They're completely different. And when you look at Michael Jackson's body, you go look at Diana Ross's body, and then you see identical. Like, it's like they're identical. And there's so much of what their appearance looks the same. And Jermaine, when you look at Jermaine, you can see Catherine. It's Tito looks like Joe, Jermaine looks like Catherine. So Jermaine and Tito don't look alike. If you were to tell me, like, from that band, if, like, let's say it was just Jermaine and Tito that were related in that band, and somebody was asking you to tell them, okay, well, who's family from this band? You wouldn't pick Jermaine and Tito. That's not who you would pick. You'd pick somebody else. You pick Michael and Jackie. You know, you probably say, oh, Michael and Jackie. I think they kind of, you know, but you might say Marlon and Michael, or somebody, you know, who knows exactly what you'd say. If somebody just told you it was only two of them, if somebody came and said there's only two, who would you pick? Now, that's like the way you definitely wouldn't take Jermaine and Tito. They don't look like, when you look at it, like, they don't look anything alike. And that's the reason of why Michael's able to fit into that family. Because just the simple reality, because we know Tito looks like Joe, and Jermaine looks like Catherine, and we know that they're family. We know that they're family. But if somebody just asked you, like, is this guy related? If somebody asked you to pick, if they said two of these guys are related and pick them out, nobody would pick Jermaine and Tito and say they're related. Nobody would. But it's within the context, since you do have Tito and you've got Jermaine looking so different, you could have thrown anybody in that family. As long as he had a basically was the same, you know, the height was close enough, that was all that needed to be. Their skin colors are close enough, they got afros, that's all they need. But when you look at the reality of it, Michael does not sing, none of them sing anywhere near what Michael does. None of them have the talent of Michael. Michael's the one that had the talent. He's the lead singer of the band. There's no doubt about it. The reason that the band is getting signed is because of Michael's talent. There's no doubt about it. The other Jackson brothers, without Michael in that band, okay, the four, they're not getting signed by Motown. That's not happening. No chance. No chance about it. No way. And that's like the difference. What people, you need to recognize, there's a difference here. A big difference. Just take just the simple reality. Without Michael in that band, the band does not get signed to Motown. They're not capable. But Michael could have got signed to Motown by himself. It's totally different. Michael has talent. The talent of what the other band is it's common. It's common folk talent, like Janet Jackson. The people think she's got talent and stuff, and it's like, no, the talent is that she was related, you know, technically related to Michael, everybody, and she's in the Jackson family, and so through that they were able to work it, you know. But in reality, without Michael ever being in the family, Janet never would have made it, and you could see that they all got just common talent. And that's what I say about the Jackson family, is that any family in the country, basically, if you got 10 children in the family, let's say you got a family with 10 children, okay, the Jacksons didn't have, well, technically I think they would have had 10 with the one kid that died. I think there would have been 10. I think there would have been 10 kids there then. So just any family that would have had 10 children, okay, so all those families are going to have the same talent as the Jacksons, okay, so that's common talent. It's just common. And it's not the greatness. Michael Jackson's something totally different. He's above and beyond. He doesn't belong in that family. His real parents are Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson, and Michael got this gift because his parents were real talented, gifted people, and Michael got their gifts, and he became this kid with all this talent. And, you know, he was given to Joe Jackson, who was a friend of Berry Gordy's. You know, so Joe Jackson, once the kid showed talent, Joe Jackson knew exactly what to do. You know, and that's why when Michael starts, when Michael is given to the Jackson family, at that time when you look like in the Jackson's American Dream, when you go back and do your research about what's taking place, you find out that Joseph, that's when he stops working at the steel mill, and Joseph reforms his band, okay, because he doesn't know that Michael's got talent. And the other big thing is, Joseph is not training his children to be musicians at that time. That's not what happened. When you look at the real story, but if Joseph was like what they call a stage father, okay, Joseph would have already been training his kids and preparing them to be musicians and stuff. But he wasn't doing that. He was busy working at the steel mill. And his kids weren't showing that they were all gifted. They weren't showing talent, like real serious talent. They weren't showing it. That's why when Michael gets given to the Jackson family, Joseph doesn't form the band at that time. Joseph reforms his band because he trusts in himself. He doesn't trust in the kids. That's the real story. That's really what happened. The story that they tell you, how Joseph is like building the kids, the group and stuff, that happened after that. And if Joseph is supposed to be this kind of stage father, that he's working his kids so hard, he would have been doing that already. But that's not what would happen. And that he wouldn't have gone back on the road himself. He would have been going on the road with the kids. I mean, if he took Michael on the road at 5 years old, okay, the brothers are already older than that. So at the time when Joseph like forms his band, the Falcons, he reforms that band, which is right at the time that Michael comes into the house. And that's because Joe now has a connection to Berry Gordy, where Berry Gordy is building Motown at the same time. It's occurring at the same time. And he's like, okay, well, Berry Gordy's building this Motown Records. And so in the reality of the situation, what does Joe do? At that time in history, what does Joe do? Joe stops working at the steel mill at that time, and Joe tries to rebuild his band, and he's going to go be a star. Okay, but it didn't work for Joe. Berry Gordy's not just handing out record contracts. Joe doesn't want to disrupt the whole situation because he's got to be getting money for Michael. Plus, he still has the connection to Berry. So Joe then at that time starts to train Tito. Because the story of what they tell you, like in the Jackson's American Dream, is that Tito was secretly playing the guitar. Okay, well, just think about the reality of the situation. Joseph Jackson in that small house and that guitar, that's like the only thing that he owns that's his, that nobody touches it, nobody plays his guitar. That guitar would have been super important to him. You think those kids would have just been able to pick up Joseph Jackson's guitar and start playing it without Joseph being aware of it? Because that's the story that they tell. That's the story that they actually tell. Is that possible? It's not possible. But what's more possible? That now Joe's got the connection with Berry Gordy. He tries to make it, but it doesn't work. So Joe starts to now look at his kids, because Michael still is just a baby. He's just a young kid. Michael's not showing the talent yet. So Joseph, doing what he can, he starts to train Tito how to play the guitar. That's what would have happened. If Tito's learning how to play the guitar, it's because Joseph is training him now to play the guitar. And so he's training Tito how to play the guitar. At some point, Jermaine starts to play the bass. He starts to pick that up. And then when Michael starts to sing, Joseph instantly builds a band and they hit the road. It wasn't that Joseph was a stage father, and because stage fathers, it doesn't matter if your kids have talent or not. A true stage father thinks that their kids are the best. Okay, well, if Joseph would have thought his kids were the best and stuff, then Joseph would have been taking the other brothers. He would have formed a band already with his the other siblings, and he would have been on the road with them. But that wasn't what happened. Joseph started to build the band, teaching Tito. Then Tito and Jermaine, they started off trying to work, trying to put a band together. But, they weren't really doing nothing. They were just playing locally in the talent contest for the school and stuff. That's what was happening. But then Michael shows the talent. As soon as Michael shows the talent, Joseph basically puts the band together and they go on the road. Why does he trust that kid so much? Joseph's not a kind of guy that would look at a 5-year-old kid and say, oh, that kid's got so much talent. He wouldn't trust his whole family's future on some 5-year-old kid. Not Joseph. He's not that kind of guy. He'd be like, yeah, the kid can sing, but he's just a kid, damn. But what's Joe do? Joe takes him on the road. Because why? Because that kid was given to him from Berry Gordy. And Joseph knows now, this kid's got the talent. I'm going to work this in my favor, and he's going to do everything he can, and he's going to get back to Motown. All that time after Joe leaves the steel mill, from the time when Michael's born, where's he getting money? When they start in the movie, Joe just shows up with a van full of instruments. Where do you get all the money for that? Is he even working at the steel mill at all that time? There's so much more to the story. But when you look at the story of what I tell, you see that my story follows the proper the proper events that are occurring in the Jackson family, you'll see that my story actually follows the proper events and the dates and everything. My story fits the actual. When you look at my story to what actually happened, you'll see my story actually fits. Everything of what I tell, when I tell my story of what happened, you'll see that my story actually fits the actual events of what we know that was occurring. And then when you look at my story and you see how it fits, then you can go back and look at the story that they tell, and you can see that their story, it's a lie. So it's easy to tell it's a lie because you look at the events that are occurring and you can say that, like I said, Tito picking up Joe's guitar secretly and learning how to play, and that's the story they tell. That doesn't make any sense. Catherine's mother naming Michael. You're saying that Joseph and Catherine never had discussions about what the name of their child was going to be, and so then Catherine, just mother who's there when Michael's born, she names the kid. She throws out the name Michael, and then Catherine's, oh, okay, that sounds good, and Joe then just accepts it. That doesn't make any sense. That would not have happened. If Catherine was pregnant, that means her and Joseph would have been up talking about the baby's name. They would have had those discussions. They're married and shit. But no, in the movie they tell you that didn't occur, that they never had discussed the name of this child. I mean, she's supposed to be pregnant with the kid. I mean, come on. When you actually look at the reality of the situation, like I said, when you look at the time when Michael comes into the house, Joseph quits. They say that he got laid off at the steel mill, but the reality is he stops working at the steel mill. We don't know if he's laid off or if he quit. We don't know actually how that event went down. But at the time when Michael comes in the house, Joe stops working at the steel mill. And what does Joe do at that time? Joe reforms his band, the Falcons. Why does he do that? He had all this time in the past, when he's having the kids, maybe after he had one kid or two kids, maybe then he would try to reform the band. But no, he has a whole bunch of kids. He's not doing the Falcons thing. None of that's occurring. Once he started working at the steel mill, started having kids, he had given up his dreams as being a music star. He wasn't doing that. Maybe he was playing guitar, messing around with people and stuff like that, but he wasn't like in a band. He was just around and stuff. So it's like there's a lot of holes in the story of the Jacksons, and when you look at my story, it clarifies everything. It's just like, when is people going to start caring about the truth, start caring about Michael Jackson? Because people always say they care about Michael Jackson. It's like, well, you can't defend Michael Jackson unless you're telling the true story. Because everything, like the people that they say they're trying to defend Michael Jackson, they try and defend like the pedophile things of what Michael Jackson did by like sleeping with children. They try to justify that. There's no justifying that. The only thing that what can justify it is the true understanding of who Michael Jackson actually was, an abandoned child. And it still doesn't actually justify the things that he did. The things he did were wrong. And so the fans are try and say Michael's innocent because the things he did, it was okay for him to do that. No, it's not. It's not okay for a 40-year-old man to be sleeping in bed with children when he's got 3 children of his own now. He's got 3 children of his own, but still, he's not spending time. What about the neglect? The neglect he's showing as a parent for his own children and showing favoritism to these other kids. It's not right. There's things that are wrong there. And the people are always trying to say that they can justify Michael's actions by validating the things that he did. You can't validate. Some of the things he did were wrong. But I can explain it. When you understand the larger context of what was actually going on, there is an actual explanation for it. But it doesn't actually validate the things. Some of the things he did was wrong. But he's not a pedophile. But the nature of the situation of being a 40-year-old man and having these relationships with young boys, it's wrong. You can't do that stuff. There's no explaining and saying that it's okay. It was never okay. It's not okay. Just take like a situation like, let's say Michael Trapson had a younger brother. Let's say Michael Jackson's still alive, right? And let's say Michael Trapson's out there doing Michael Jackson impersonations. And let's say Michael Trapson has a younger brother, and then somehow Trapson meets Michael Jackson, and his younger brother's with him, and then Michael offers him to come visit him at the Neverland Ranch, and Michael Trapson's younger brother ends up staying the night in Michael Jackson's room. Okay, let's say that occurred, right? And then let's say the next morning that Michael Trapson's younger brother says to Trapson, oh, you know what? When Michael Jackson, he'd say, guess what? When Michael Jackson got up in the morning, he had an erection. He got, because that's what happens to men. That's just a common thing. So at that moment, if the younger brother then tells Trapson, hey, guess what? When I got up in the morning, I saw Michael Jackson get up and go to the bathroom, and he had an erection. Okay, is that okay? Is how is that acceptable? That's not acceptable. What would Trapson do at that moment? He would think that that's funny, that you let your younger brother sleep in a room with an adult man who gets erections. You think that that's funny? You think that's okay? Because that's what Trapson tries to do in his videos, his angry videos and shit, you know? So it's like, you're going to tell me that at all the time that Michael spent with all those kids, that he didn't get erections? And you're going to tell me that none of those kids ever saw Michael with an erection, or that none of those kids ever jumped on Michael while he had an erection? You're going to tell me that that didn't occur? Of course, it had to have occurred at some point. And the only reason why it could not have, there's only one reason why it could not have occurred, because I've seen Michael Jackson with erections, so we know he can get erections. So the only reason it could not have occurred is if Michael was drugged so much. So then in the reality, it'd be like, okay, so you're telling me that Michael, it was okay for this adult man to be under the influence of heavy narcotics or alcohol while he's sleeping in the room with the kids? You're going to tell me that that's okay? No, it's not okay. But there is an explanation for it, that the Michael Jackson was abandoned as a child, and he had to live his life under this lie. You know, and he was so damaged that he remained a virgin the whole time, his whole life. And then he ended up having these friendships with children because Michael was like in a stunted state of arrested development, and he never developed naturally through his teen years. He had a problem. He had a real problem, and it caused him to feel like this Peter Pan complex. And it caused him to hang out with children, even at the time of where he's got his own children. He's neglecting his own children and spending time with these other kids that aren't his. You know, there's things wrong in the Michael Jackson story. But all the fans are out there, they want to justify Michael Jackson's actions. You can't justify his actions. You got to understand, who is the person? Who was Michael Jackson really? And when you actually look into that story, it turns out that there's a crazy story behind it. The reason he's got all the talent, the reason that he's feeling like having this Peter Pan complex, is because he was abandoned as a child from his real parents, Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson, because at the time that Diana Ross gets pregnant, that falls in line with the time that Smokey Robinson is building Motown Records with Berry Gordy. And Berry Gordy was not going to take the chance of building a record company around his #1 artist, Smokey Robinson, if Smokey Robinson had a child from a 14-year-old girl in the neighborhood. That could have, not only would it have ruined Motown, it would have ruined Berry Gordy's reputation, of which maybe he would have never, because you got to remember, they're not rich, famous stars at that time. They're trying to make it. Is Berry Gordy really going to risk his entire future and his credibility and his reputation on the chance that a scandal breaks out with Smokey Robinson having a child from a 14-year-old girl? He wouldn't. He would not. And that's why they got rid of the kid, moved the kid out of state, but it's only 200 miles away. Gary, Indiana is only 200 miles away from Detroit. It's not that far, but it's out of state. It's far enough, and he's in the Jackson family being raised by them, and then that's all there is. He's being raised as one of their kids. And what happened? Michael died, Michael became a giant star, biggest star in the world, lived to be 50 years old and died, and the secret was never revealed. So the cover-up worked pretty damn well. You know, so that's Michael Jackson's real life story, the true story of who he actually is. And it's just like, It's been explained now. I've explained the songs. I've explained all of Michael Jackson's life. I can explain all the instances and occurrences of what's taken place within the context of Michael Jackson's life. I explain it all. It's being explained now with hard evidence and hard facts. And you'll see that my evidence and my facts, they don't break down. Is like I said, now that I've got the real facts, I can go back and I can break down the Jackson story, the story about what all you guys think, every instant about the whole thing, like that the Jacksons don't have the talent of Michael. The story about how Tito started playing the guitar from the beginning, and then you go all the way to the end. Then Michael Jackson having the Peter Pan complex. Michael Jackson making a song like Dirty Diana, that he made that song about, you know, and everything about his life and how he continued, how he had the pedophile allegations in 93, 94, or whatever it was, but then how even after that, when he's totally humiliated, stripped down butt naked, photographed his genitals and all of that experience, but then he has his own children, and what does he do? He goes right back on TV saying it's perfectly fine to be sharing your bed with children, so that he put his own children at risk. And so none of that makes sense. There's something wrong. And like I said, once you look at my story, I can go back and I can just break down the Jackson story of what you think. It doesn't make sense. There's holes in it. There's things that are not explainable. And that's the thing with the Jackson fans. Instead of accepting that there's something wrong there, they're always trying to make excuses for the things that occurred. And it's like, they're pathetic. There is no excuses for the things that occurred. These things are abnormal. They're weird. How come Michael's got all this talent, and then how come he's raised in this big family with his mother and father and all the brothers, and they were a family unit as a brothers, and then even after that, Janet came up and became a big star. So Michael's got like all this family to lean on, but for some reason he's calling himself Peter Pan and living in the Neverland Ranch? It's odd. And then he doesn't have any real female companions when he's a giant star. It's like, when you're a giant, okay, but he's willing to try drugs. We know he's willing to experiment with all kinds of drugs. Why wouldn't he have experimented sexually with these women? Oh, well, if he was informed at 10 years old by Diana Ross that he was actually an abandoned child, and so he understands the results of getting into having a relationship with a woman, that could lead to having a child, and he didn't want to do that to another child because he was suffering from that had happened to him. Well, that's how it develops, where he stays a virgin all the time, where he doesn't build into relationships, because there's no way that would have happened. He would have had, if he was willing to experiment with drugs and alcohol, why wouldn't he have been willing to experiment with women and everybody that's an adult who's had sex and stuff? And it doesn't matter if you're gay or if you're straight or if you're pedophile. At some point, you're experimenting with all of it. It's like, you don't just take one drug and then you say, that's the only drug I'm going to do the rest of my life. No, you experiment with some other stuff. Now, you might stay with the one, and you might say, oh, this is my favorite and stuff, but you experiment with other stuff. But Michael didn't do any of that. There's no experimenting with women and sexual encounters with women. And none of the women, the women that say it, they'll say, oh, one time I had sex with, I had sex with Michael one time. Or you get, damn, Lisa Marie's like, here's the thing with Lisa Marie. When they did the MTV Awards, and Michael says, they said that this would never last, and he kissed Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie says to that, she says, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, which what that shows is that it was planned. Their whole relationship was planned. And so, like, they would go out and they would do a photo shoot, and that was planned. They would go to an event, and that was planned. Okay, so Michael, if Michael and Lisa Marie are married, they don't need to talk about kissing and stuff. They just kiss all the time. It wouldn't be such a dramatic thing for her to say, oh, I didn't know he was going to do that, because that's what she said. She said, oh, I didn't know he was going to do that. It's like, well, if he's your husband, he doesn't got to inform you. It just happens all the time. And it happens so frequently that it would be such a natural thing. But that's not what happened. She says, oh, I didn't know he was going to do that. That's what she said. And it's like, yeah, because their whole relationship is a staged event, and if they were going to do something like that, they would usually have discussions about their performance, about what they're going to do. They're just performing for the public. And so they didn't have the discussion about him kissing her, that performance was going to happen and stuff, But it's like, that's what I'm saying. When you look at the reality of the situation, you see that their story doesn't make sense. And when you take it from the real context of the story, then you see that my story makes sense. My story actually explains what's going on. Okay, so that's all for now. We'll talk to you later. Bye.